Go ahead. Great. Thank you, Shelley. I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Make sure that everyone can see it okay. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Laura. I am the Membership and Volunteer Manager at Main Street. Main Street is an affordable and inclusive apartment building with a community center where people of all abilities can live, learn, and thrive together. So I'm really happy to be presenting today. I joined Main Street in this position a couple months ago. This is my first big presentation. So if I look at my notes, that's why. And I'm going to give you just a brief overview of what Main Street is, how you can become a part of it, and then I'll leave some time for questions at the end. So the founder of Main Street is Jillian Copeland. Main Street was founded in 2017, and she's also the founder of the Diener School, which is located in I think it's located in Rockville. She really founded Main Street because she has one son with some developmental disabilities, and as he was kind of turning the age of 21, when a lot of entitlements ceased to exist for people with disabilities, they were looking all over the country for housing models that provided affordable housing and inclusive housing, and really realized that they don't exist to the extent that she wanted. So she created Main Street. The organization was founded in 2017 into 2018, and the apartment complex, which is located in Rockville, broke ground in 2020, in the summer of 2020 during COVID. So the mission of Main Street is to create dynamic opportunities through affordable, inclusive housing and community engagement so people of all abilities can live their best lives. So it's really a place where people with disabilities can choose where and how they live, who they spend their time with, and ways in which they can pursue their passions and interests. So we really are three things at Main Street. We are an affordable and accessible apartment complex. So we have 70 units in our apartment. 75% of the units are affordable and 25% were specifically set aside for adults with disabilities. We also have a membership-based community that is open to all. So whether it's promoting wellness, participating in the events that we organize, pursuing personal growth, professionally networking, we provide a welcoming place for individuals to come together in a supportive and accepting environment. And we have a lot of different membership options that provide access to programs that really seek to cater to a bunch of different diverse interests and preferences. And I'll speak more about that later. We're also a movement of inclusion. So we are always seeking to there's always an advocacy component to our work. We are always seeking to build awareness about the importance of such inclusive communities, and in the hopes that they expand and they grow. And we do a lot of webinars or conferences and speaking engagements to kind of share about a lot of the models and lessons learned at Main Street. So we have an approach at Main Street that we call Bring Your Own Independence, which means that we don't provide services, but we do provide accessibility and choice. So we are an apartment building and a community center, but we are not a facility or a service provider. So a lot of our residents that live at Main Street live entirely independently. They might have a support staff or a life coach that they meet with periodically throughout the week. Maybe one or two of them do have a support staff that lives with them in the building, but it's up to the residents and the members of Main Street to coordinate that themselves. So our apartments are located in Rockville Town Center. We're just 500 feet away from the metro. In fact, the day that our apartments opened, the lines opened for people to get on the waiting list for the apartment was 2 days into the pandemic in 2020, and we received over 11,000 phone calls on just that one singular day, which speaks to the need for housing options like this. So we do have about 50 residents with disabilities that live in the apartment building, and we do cooperate a lot with first responders, government employees, healthcare workers as well. In fact, this is our resident Joe. He's our officer. He's a retired police officer, and he serves as our resident safety officer. These are just a couple of photos of the apartments. We have 3, 2, and 1 bedroom apartments, as well as some studios. And there are special features in the apartments for accessibility. So an example that I always provide is that the stoves and the oven will turn off after a certain amount of time if they're not being used. This is our community center. So this is really where all of our on-site programming takes place. We have a fitness center with a lot of high-level amenities and equipment. We also have a towel service, lockers and showers. We have a classroom, which is kind of serves as the multi-purpose space where we do a lot of exercise classes and several of our programs. And then the multimedia room you'll see here, we call that Poppy Boy's Kitchen, which is named after Jillian, our founder's father. It's an amazing community space where we host all of our big programs. So we have one program called Friday Vibes, which happens at the end of every week. We have almost 50 members every single week come and we share a meal together and then we do some type of activity. All of our rooms have technology that provides Zoom, Sonos, live stream capability so that we're able to provide hybrid programming, especially since we opened during COVID. And we also have a patio that holds about 215 people. We have grill, herb garden, fire pits, heat lamps, so we can do programming all throughout the year and an infinity waterfall. We also have a cafe, which is the street-facing space of our property, and it's owned and operated by Main Street. It's centrally located and right next to the courthouse. So we do a lot of inclusive, competitive employment for people with disabilities at the cafe. We do a lot of programs at the cafe. Really try to make it an inclusive gathering space, and we've newly started catering if anyone is interested. So now I want to talk about the membership component of Main Street, which is really where my role comes in. So our memberships are offered for any adults 18 or older. We offer programs all throughout the day, evenings, and on the weekends. And we have several different options based off of how involved a member wants to be, what their interests are. And of course, we always want everyone to feel as though they have a place to belong at Main Street, and we make a priority of offering financial aid. So you do not need to be a resident to be a member of Main Street. And we have something that you'll see here called a Community Pass add-on. So if you are a member but you don't live in the building and you want to spend more time at Main Street, you can purchase this at a very, very low rate for the entire year, and it gives you the ability to use the community center spaces outside of just the programs that you might attend. Our programs are mostly in person or hybrid, with maybe 1 or 2 a month that are virtual only, which of course we've adjusted and shifted since COVID. So just in terms of our members, we have about 265 members with and without disabilities from several different states, which is another reason why we try to offer hybrid programming where we can. And members have access to 12 to 15 programs a week. So our programs focus on culture, movement, wellness, art, food. We do a lot of social programs. And we bring in a lot of outside facilitators who are always offering universal design approaches and scaffolded support with a really great team of staff, volunteers, and interns. So I'll just point out a couple of them here. This program right here is with one of our staff members, Sharon, and it's called Bake with Sharon because our multi-purpose room has a commercial kitchen. We can do a lot of classes in there. So she does like a guided baking or cooking demo once a month. We've also had boxing classes where a boxing gym will come in with their members and the facilitators and lead classes. And we do partner with other organizations. So we're doing a lot of outings as well. We like to do programs at Main Street, but we're always seeking to embrace the location that we're in. So we try to do a lot of programs in Washington, D.C. We go to a lot of sporting events, things like that. So these are just a couple of statistics. A really big part of Main Street is gathering data and feedback from our members. So our data really drives our membership experiences and informs our programming. And we always do an annual member survey with, and in the past, we've partnered with research and evaluation firms to help us really create this more. We even did a research study with the University of Maryland, which really identified the quality of life that the impact of members' quality of life at Main Street. And there were some very statistically significant impacts on quality of life, neighborhood, and community satisfaction and personal well-being. And these are just a few of the statistics of what our members said in our most recent annual member survey. So I'm going to end it there and take some time for questions. I'm going to put my email in the chat as well as our website, but please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions after, if you'd like to have a tour. I always organize tours. Even if you just want to come see the space, if you're local, we would be happy to have you. One thing in the chat. Christine said, is there a wait list for Main Street apartments? Is it open and accepting new names? I believe it is. So we have a separate website that handles all the apartment stuff, and I'll include the list to both. And you talk directly to the property manager about living in the actual apartment. We of course work together with them, but that's an entirely separate piece. Do you have any music appreciation programs? That's a great question, and something that I really care about because I'm a musician. We have done a lot of music appreciation programs in the past, and as a part of our cultural programs, we brought musicians in, and we do a lot of outings with our members where we go we've gone to the Kennedy Center before, different like concerts in the local area.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. So if you have more questions about Main Street, please keep putting them in the chat. Oh, I did see one more come up. How many bedrooms in each unit? I think you said you have 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms.
Yes, and studio apartments. So it depends. I will send and we do.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. We're going to move on to Susan Hartung and Laura Doherty from Maryland Medical and Rehab Services. Laura is a supervisor there. She supervises the coordinators of community services. Susan is a former MCPS teacher and currently the provider relations specialist for Maryland Medical and Rehab Services. She's also the mother of 2 adult children with developmental disabilities. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura and Susan.
Thank you, Shelley. I'm going to go ahead and give a short presentation, and then Laura's going to answer any questions that you might have, okay? So let me go ahead and share my screen and put it into... It's jumping around on me, guys. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about briefly the residential services that are available through the Developmental Disability Administration. A lot of acronyms right now, so hopefully I won't be stumbling through them too much. The first thing you need to know about any of these programs that I'm going to explain to you is that they offer people who are eligible for Developmental Disability Administration services. And what that means is someone who has to have a mental or physical or combination of those 2 disability, but not mental health. The disability has to start before age 22. It has to be lifelong, and you need to be a person who will need some sort of assistance to live independently. All right, there are 3 Medicaid waivers that DDA offers. The first 2 only are supported through the Housing Support Services, which I will explain in a minute. And the Community Pathways waiver is available to all 4 the different services I'm going to present. The Family Supports waiver, and this is very general, don't quote me on this, is usually for adults or children who are not out of school yet, who are living with their family, and they provide more limited supports. The Community Supports waiver, generally speaking, is for people who just want support during the day. And then the Community Pathways waiver, which will allow you to access any of these housing support services, is more of a wraparound service. It can be supported during the day and at night, vocationally, in any number of ways. Okay, click. All right, so what do we mean by residential services? This is for individuals who do not want to live in a nursing home, who don't want to live in what we refer to as an ICF, an intermediate care facility, or what we used to think of as institutions. The type of place or living a person chooses depends on their needs, their preferences, and goals. And as I said, there are 4 different types of services. And the first one is shared living. And almost all of us have lived in a shared living experience. If you're living with your parents, you're living in a shared living experience right now. But it doesn't have to be with your parents. Sometimes it's when you live with a roommate. Maybe you live with another couple. the person that you're living with is considered the host family. But all of these services that DDA offers have been designed to help you keep and build skills that you need for everyday life and to live as independently as possible. In shared living, one of the goals and hopes is that trust and a feeling of commitment can develop between the people living in this home, and develops a caring, warm atmosphere. All right, many of you are probably familiar with the concept of a community living in a group home. This is when you choose to live in a home that is not owned by you, it's owned by an agency, or what we refer to as a provider, or it's rented by the provider. So you live in somebody else's home. Usually there is a limit to the number of people who can live in this home, and it's always provides round the clock support is provided to the individuals who live there. You might have heard the term ALU. That's an alternative living unit. That is a group home, but where the maximum number of people who can live there are 3, but they also have the wraparound services. And I have provided this handout to Shelley, and she will share it with you, and you will see that I have links throughout it. So if you click on them, when this is done, you can get more information. Community living enhanced supports, that is a group home that provides more intensive supports. Some people will need it for physical issues, some will need it for behavioral issues. It is people with more severe challenging behaviors or court-ordered restrictions. And the idea here is that they want to create a situation where everybody can remain safe. And the last one, and the newest one that DDA has been talking about, is supported living. This is where somebody lives on their own and they choose where they decide to live. It's offered to people to help them find their own home and communities they choose, and it's available in all 3 waivers. That doesn't mean you own and purchase the home necessarily. It may be you just rent an apartment or you lease a townhouse, but it's one that you have chosen to live in, and you are the primary person responsible for making sure that you can live there. All right, what are housing support services? All right, so in school, you had an IEP, an individual education plan. When you leave school, you get something called a person-centered plan, which is a PCP. And now we're going to introduce another acronym, housing support services. And these are time-limited supports, which means they will not go on forever, but they are designed to provide the individual with information assistance in deciding whether this living on your own is a good idea for you, transition services to moving into this home, and then sustaining services to make sure that things continue to go well and that you have a long-term plan and that work out. So how can housing support services help you? All right, so the first thing you have to do is in your person-centered plan, you create a person-centered housing plan. Next, you have to locate housing, find and obtain resources, because what's probably the biggest question is, how are you going to afford to live on your own and where you're deciding to do it? When you live on your own, it just doesn't matter. You can't just move in and set up shop. You have to be either a good homeowner or a good tenant. And a tenant is a term that means that you are renting a place from somebody else who owns the property. How do you talk to landlords and property managers? How can you request a reasonable accommodations or modifications? Do you need a ramp? Do you need stoves that turn off automatically, for example, as was just mentioned? How can you access support services? So maybe you found the perfect place you want to live. Everything's falling into place, but now you have to get to work. What public transportation will be available to you there? And most importantly, can you create and maintain a house budget? And that's everything a housing support specialist can do for you. Another question is, can you still get other DDA services when you have a housing support plan? And the answer is yes. If you need personal supports, if you need help getting a job, if you need help with environmental adaptations or modifications, all those are still available to you. All right, so what is the process? All right, so you start with the screening, okay? Is this an option that would be good for you? What are the barriers to your housing to be able to live like in this kind of format? Um, and what are the barriers for you continuing to live there? It may be great the first 6 months, but can you do this for the next year or two? So you'll develop short and long-term goals. You'll acknowledge what those barriers are. You'll identify them and figure out strategies to circumvent them. And you'll look for those natural supports in the community. So maybe it's transportation. Maybe you really need to be able to get to a gym or a swimming pool. Maybe you want to be able to go home and see your family. How are you going to get there? So those are the things that go into transition services. And these are the kinds of things a housing support specialist will do. They'll work with you in education and training. They'll teach you to have a good relationship with landlord and property managers or neighbors. If you get into a fight with a neighbor, it's not like just getting into a fight with a schoolmate or your parents. You're going to be next to these people or living with them for a long time, so you have to make that work out. You have to go through an annual recertification process. You have to look at your behaviors that might jeopardize your tenancy. Do you like to play video games? Do you play them really loud at 3 o'clock in the morning? That might be an issue. How are you going to resolve disputes? And again, advocacy and updating your plan. Who qualifies for housing support services? You have to be 18. You have to be in one of the 3 waivers, okay? And you must have a housing goal in your person-centered plan. In an IEP, you had to have math and reading goals, right? Well, in your PCP, if you want to have a housing support specialist help you, you must have a housing goal in your plan. What are PCP housing goals? You have to have a desire to indicate that you want to live in your own home, or you're currently living in your own home, but you need help, or you're living in your own home, but you want to change the situation. You don't like where you're living, or you want a bigger place. Ways that a housing support specialist can help you do this: apply for affordable housing resources, work on developing a lease, developing those good relationships with neighbors and landlords, taking care of your home, making sure it stays clean and well taken care of. And again, being able to access those support services. All right, so who can give you who provides housing support services? There are specific agencies at DDA that have gone through training, and DDA has authorized to be a housing support service and have staff to do that. Your CCS, and if you're not familiar with that term, that's the agency that Ms. Doherty and I work with, that we provide CCSs. It's a coordinator of community services, but in shorthand, we call them case managers. Your CCS will help you identify the different agencies that are authorized to provide housing support services and help you decide on which one is best for you. So here's the process. You talk with your CSS about a desired housing situation. You make sure that there is a goal in your plan for housing. You get a list of the housing support service providers. You ask the CSCS for assistance in picking one, interview them, and make sure your CCS knows who you have picked. In addition, we have some other housing partnerships in the state of Maryland. There are rent subsidy programs. The Maryland Department of Disabilities manages a rent subsidy wait list. And by subsidies, we mean they will give you money to reduce your rental based on income. But it's a limited amount of money, and there's usually a waiting list for it. So you have to apply to it. The Department of Housing and Community Development reviews those applications, and they issue vouchers to people who are eligible. And then we have something relatively new in the last few years, the Maryland Inclusive Housing. They can give grants to people to be able to get into their own house. They basically facilitate creation of affordable housing. If a new development is going up, for example, they might work with a developer and ask, will you designate a certain amount of residences in this complex for people who have limited incomes or disabilities and make it more affordable? I love this chart, but I'm not going to go over it, but you should look at it sometime. But I like it because it You can look at it in two ways. And this first row up here this is the person. This is what the individual trying to get a house is responsible for. And if you look at it, it's just identify a goal. And this is what your poor case manager needs to do, your CCS. This is their responsibilities in the process. Oh, but look at this housing support specialist. Their job is to do all these things to get you into your own home. And then again, there's the Maryland Department of Disabilities, which tries to get you help, and the Department of Housing and Community Development, which review requests for help. And I would encourage you to go to the Maryland Inclusive Housing website. Here is their link. Their mission is to help people with intellectual and developmental disabilities successfully access and maintain inclusive, affordable, and accessible housing of their choice by creating opportunities, identifying resources, connecting people, and providing services. And that is pretty much my quick overview. Lots of questions in the chat, I see. Laura, you want to start working on those?
Yep, just started. So, can you apply to one of the housing partnerships if you receive waiver services but do not have housing supports in your PCP? So this question makes me feel that somebody is aware of a PCP, they have a coordinator. So in that case, you would talk to your coordinator and you would say, I'd like to revise my person-centered plan so that I can request housing support services or any other form of residential services if you don't already have it in your person-centered plan or PCP. What are the current wait lists to get housing support? I don't know what the wait list is because each provider agency who does the housing support services may have various waiting lists. Some may not have any wait list at all. Others may have a wait list. It really just depends on, where you decide you want to live, what type of housing you want to live in, and those types of things. So I will tell you that it's not going to be a fast process, but it really is just, it's very subjective based upon several components, to be honest with you.
Okay. I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. Anyone else have a question for Susan or Laura this time? Okay, and we'll open it up at the end for all the questions. But thank you, Laura and Susan, very much. And someone did put it in the chat, but I will send the slide decks from Laura and Susan and from our first presenter, Laura, as well. And I know that they are happy to answer questions that anyone may have as well. So last but not least, we have Tate Danielson. He's the new Executive Director of Integrated Living Opportunities. He started in July of 2023, taking over for the founder, Mady Carney, after she successfully built and expanded the organization for over 9 years. Tate has been working for nonprofits for over 25 years and currently lives in Rockville. So thank you, Tate, for being here, and I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Shelley. So I'm Tate Danielson. I'm the Executive Director of ILO, or Integrated Living Opportunities. I'm going to put in the chat all my information right now. You might see there that some strange thing that says I'm available 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. That is 100% true. I see this organization, from what I took over from Mady, as an opportunity for us to build relationships and build community. And that's kind of the point that Mady got to when she started this. So Mady Tamcarty, 9 years ago, with her daughter Ellie, was looking for a way to fill some of the gaps that come into play when you start to think about living independently. So when it's time and you feel like you want to move out of your parents' home or out of your guardian's home and you want to find a space for yourself, that is a moment of transition. And Mady found that there wasn't always a space for folks to have that support they needed. So what ILO did was started to create communities. We have 5 different locations of what we call our pods, or our communities of support, which are Germantown, Gaithersburg, Rockville, Bethesda, and Washington, D.C. And in those spaces, we are working to try to build a support network for folks to feel like they're connected to other peers. So not just but we're not an agency, we're a nonprofit organization. So really trying to find those spaces where you can lean on other folks who are also living independently through ways of communicating to one another and building relationships, and also trying to find spaces so you can have activities together. So we have a variety of activities every week in each one of those cities. We get together and communicate to one another. We have a staff of 10 people that are supporting what we call our self-advocates. Those are anyone who's part of the ILO program. And in that time, we try to figure out how to build on that transition, that first transition of life, trying to move into your own space, whether that be with a caregiver or by yourself in an apartment. And we do not provide housing. We always rely on the market rate housing amongst those cities. We try to help you find housing vouchers if you're in Maryland. We look for inclusionary zoning opportunities in Washington, D.C. And we also try to figure out what other service you can get, like DDA, which was just talked about in Maryland. We are a vendor of DDA, so our services can be worked through the self-direct services of DDA, and we have opportunities for both the community building, so having those activities, meeting with our staff, leaning in and trying to figure out what kind of skills you are looking for to build it on your independence, and really trying to shy away from any sorts of feelings of isolation so you can support one another, and we kind of lean in those moments. The next thing we're working towards is trying to figure out what other moments you'll feel a sense of isolation, that sense of loss as you start to get older and you're living in these spaces. How are we working with you to feel like you're building that community, that you're feeling like you have someone to talk to beyond family, beyond your support network, with schools or with siblings or with other extended family members? What are you building amongst yourself, not just amongst us at ILO, but with businesses and other community organizations within the communities of Rockville, Germantown, Gaithersburg, Bethesda, and Washington, D.C. That doesn't mean we don't work with people outside of those cities, but what we try to do is encourage people to, if they want to move out and move into independent living, into an apartment, that they look to those cities because they'll be in closer proximity to other members. If somehow you choose to be outside of those cities, there's still ways to network with ILO, but we would ask you to try to travel to us or also participate in the other activities we do, like going to basketball games, going to Mystics WNBA games, going to the Nutcracker over at the Fitzgerald Theater. And then last summer, we actually took a trip to Ocean City together. So we try to find those opportunities to have a lot of fun activities that can get people to get to know each other, but then ultimately working towards that goal of that you find folks that you can connect to and feel supported by beyond agencies, beyond integrated living opportunities, and really find those opportunities to build relationships that you can live upon and feel like you're supported with the choices that you make and not choices that other people are making necessary for you. So it's really an experience of trying to learn how you can lean in to deciding your own future. So one thing we work very hard at Integrated Living Opportunities is to find a way for, as we learn how to support you, that we can actually ebb and flow and change our own programming. So right now we have 40 folks that are members of ILO. It's not a large number of folks, and we try to choose to keep a small number. So we're still accepting lots of people to join ILO, but we also recognize being a small nonprofit that we're nimble and flexible to the things that follow your needs. So as you join the organization, we do a lot of discussions about how we can make ourselves better, but things that you're looking to do, other activities that you like to be a part of. And so that includes, when I say you, it includes those who are members, the self-advocates, but also the parents. So the other silo of ILO is to get the parents and siblings and guardians and anyone else involved in support of the self-advocate to be a participant in ILO as well. So every other month, all of our families get together and they try to talk about best practices. Because of pandemic, that happened a lot over Zoom, but we also try to do our best to meet in person as much as possible. And those are those opportunities to shape and build ILO into a stronger organization year to year. New things come up, new services come from DDA, new opportunities arise, new buildings get built that provide better housing. And through that networking, through that collective networking, we find opportunities to make for better independent living. We've had situations, the best example I can give is someone was living in an apartment, and we had several folks living in an apartment building, and all of a sudden there was cockroaches and mice, and there was a mold problem. That's crisis. We don't own those spaces, but we do have word of mouth, and we find and we talk to each other about best places to live. What's the next best place to live? What's the management of that place? Has it shifted in the last year? Are there new opportunities? Are there safe opportunities? What is the best practices in each one of those cities I mentioned that has the best housing opportunity? Do they accept vouchers? How do we get you into a voucher program? Do we need to port your voucher from the county to the city of Rockville? Everyone has different systems. We always work together to move into those crises, lean into them, and try to ebb and flow and try to help each individual through collective knowledge and collective movement to support one another to make your life smoother. And really trying to look towards that future. It's not about next year. It's not about 5 years. It's about 20 years. How are we building those networks so you feel like you're going to be supported and moving away from any sort of sense of isolation throughout your life? And that's the best way to put ILO into place. That's why I really don't have slides, because I like to give a brief presentation, and I'm really quite serious when I put that in my number and things. Just give me a call. We have, like I said, we have staff that I can always direct you to for more intimate information about our programming. But it's also, if I don't know the answer, I usually know where to point it to. So I'll be happy to talk to you about ILO one-on-one anytime you'd like to do that. Any questions?
I saw one question come up for you, Tate, about the cost of services through your organization.
Yep. So right now, if you want to join our community group, it's $200 a year. So $200 every year. You can join ILO and participate in presentations like this. So we'll do presentations on the ABLE account. We'll do presentations on DDA. We'll do presentations on depression and how to work through that with a psychiatrist. And other different presentations, about 8 or 9 per year. And then we have bowling every month that we actually invite community group members to come and join and get to know other self-advocates in our program. And then we also try to work with those folks on what's it going to take to transition to independent living. What is the needs of each individual participant? That one thing we know is, of our 40 participants now, there's no one that's the same. Everybody has different needs. Everyone has a different version of independence. What does that look like, and how can we assist you to move into that space? Once you feel like you're ready to live on your own, and both parents are ready, and the self-advocate is ready, then we move into that space of joining ILO as a participating family member and self-advocate. Once you want to do that, that cost is $1,600 per year, or $400 per quarter. That allows you to participate in all of our activities, whether that's be in if you decide to live in Rockville, if that's where you move to, then you can participate in the activities that go on in Rockville. But if you want to branch out and you want to go and participate in activities in Washington, D.C., which is currently most of our folks live in a building called City Ridge. If you want to go to Bethesda, currently a lot of our self-advocates live in the Glens on Battery Lane. And if you want to go to Germantown, we have a few folks that live in Germantown in different housing and condo areas up there. And then right now in Gaithersburg, there's the Crossings. If you want to do activities in each one of those pods, you're welcome to do that as well. So, and then when we go on trips on weekends to different games and activities, anyone's is allowed to participate in those activities as well. Then you have a one-on-one. Every month you'll meet with our staff to have a one-on-one to talk about how things are going. And we also offer kind of a secondary assistance, and that is we do some life coaching. That has an extra fee. First thing we would do is run a skills assessment so we can feel like what goals and skills you need to work on to feel like you're stronger living independently. And then we would assign a life coach to you to meet. And that cost is $50 an hour for those life coaches. That's on top of the original fee I mentioned. But if you want to talk to me more about kind of how you fit into that, there's also kind of ways to determine when you would start doing that. So the first step is to figure out, what does independence look like? When do you want to do it? Where do you want to live? And then we can start talking about how much participation you would want to do in the program, and if those costs make sense to you.
Great. Thank you,
I
Tate.
should mention, just because Laura was on this call, we do have 3 of our participants happen to live in Main Street, and they love it there. And so, much like the other apartments, I can focus on Rockville since I live here too. I live about a block away from Main Street myself, just because I just chose to live here. It was a coincidence. When I started the job, I was already here. But we have about 10 folks living in Fenestra, which is another apartment complex. We have one person that owns a condo in the Americana, which is next to Main Street. And then we have one person living in Boulevard 44. And then we have someone living in Park. Shoot, I'm going to forget. This thing is Parkview. It's down by Dogwood Park. So it's really their choice. People choose the best housing for them, and we try to support them the best we can. And I really do like to look at it as we're always monitoring and working with management. So the first thing we do when anyone moves into an apartment is we have very close ties with management, and those managements, they do change a lot. As anyone knows who lives in apartments, those managements can change every year, and we try to get to know those folks. We always try to look and anticipate any crises that might occur. If management isn't as good as we had hoped it would be, if the transition isn't working well, we're trying to be on top of that. So that's that secondary part of ILO, is not always directly working with you, but kind of working that back door of building the community. It's about community organizing. It's about understanding the city of Rockville and all the things that are offered to you, the kind of fun things that happen, some of the negative things that might happen, but also anticipating how we can meet with businesses, meet with potential doctors, psychiatrists, dentists. Who are the best? What's the word of mouth? Who's really doing it the best and serving you all in a quality way that we can kind of say, hey, this has worked for this person. This might work for you. Let's change things up. If things get bad, let's talk to each other and keep building the community. So it's community building and community organizing.
Thank you, Tate. I appreciate all of our presenters. There are a lot of questions flowing through the chat, and the presenters are doing a great job of answering them. So I'm trying to keep track of what's been answered, what hasn't. I did want to ask this question. It may have been answered, but a lot of people may have the question. How do you go about helping people get housing vouchers? Can you give us an idea how to go about this? My daughter's in Montgomery County, Maryland. I'll open that
Yes,
up to anyone.
I did try to answer that. So if you apply for the, if you add the housing support services into your person-centered plan and you discuss it, the provider agency that you select to help you through all of those steps is well equipped to make sure that you are applying for any and all vouchers, grants, Section 8, whatever it may be, so that you can, get as much of that type of funding taken care of to make your rent, as affordable as possible. So that is their primary goal. Have become the experts, so to speak, on how to access those grants and vouchers and things of that nature, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, you would just go to your local housing department in your county, and you can potentially apply. But I know that those wait lists are all very, very long.
Another question for Susan and Laura. My son lives in a group home and enjoys living with others. Our vision is that at some point in the future, he will live with housemates in a house that he owns or rents. He would need shared overnight staff and shared day staff. Would DDA fund the staffing through a DDA provider?
Yeah, it is very, very common for all right. So he lives in a group home now, so he probably has awake overnight services, and if he has awake overnight services, and you're looking to move him into his own apartment, you may want to look into doing self-directed and having staff. The bottom line to your question is yes, it is not. It is feasible for you to get around the clock housing support services, and especially if they're shared, because obviously shared makes it a more affordable, but to the developmental disabilities program and the state. I don't know if I answered that question appropriately. You may have to jump a couple hurdles, but yes, overall it is feasible.
Okay.
Let me just chime in. And several of our self-advocates have round the clock, 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week care, and they use their DDA self-direct. I highly recommend looking into self-direct services, because that allows you to kind of create your own staff, so you become the employer. And then if you find a direct support professional that works for you, then you can actually decide what their salary is and pay them to do those services. And we found that DDA, in most cases, I'm not going to say in all cases, but has found a way to pay for that. much like they pay for some of the vendor community building services that we offer. I wanted to also say about the voucher. We've been
Yeah, you
talking a
just
lot
got it.
about.
Yeah.
Sorry.
A question just came up for you about the voucher. Yeah, so
Yeah, so interestingly enough, so we've been talking about this a lot lately because we wanted to move some folks around recently. And so if you get a voucher through the state of Maryland, through one of the counties, through Montgomery County or Prince George's County, and you possess that voucher, it's sometimes very difficult to get. You can be on a waiting list for a very long time. Often different crises might elevate you from that waiting list, but we found that it sometimes can take a few months, a year, 6 years. It's very kind of sporadic. And what we've learned is that if you can find a county that has at that moment, because what it is they might offer the vouchers to several people, and those people have already moved. They've moved to another state. They don't need that voucher. All of a sudden, what county might have a collection of extra vouchers all of a sudden. So if you can find a county that you can apply to, if you're living in Maryland, you want to apply to any of the counties, doesn't have to be the county you're living in, and then you want to port. So porting a voucher is a real thing. So if you, and what's very interesting is the city of Rockville has its own voucher system. So outside Rockville's in Montgomery County, but they have their own voucher system. They have their own department. They have their own housing department that have their own waiting list. Montgomery County has its own waiting list. But if you can find one of the counties that you can get a voucher somehow and then want to port it to where you want to live. So you like an apartment in Rockville, but you haven't gotten through their list yet for the voucher, you could actually move your voucher to those spaces. And we've had several families that have been able to work that out lately. And it's a struggle. It's a lot. It's like any bureaucracy. It takes time. It takes energy. We had one family that was working with one of the HOC departments, and they actually lost all their paperwork. So how we support each other to make sure that if that happens, that we're working together at both you as an individual and the agency and the entities, the bureaucracies and the government, so you can feel like you're supported. And that's going to take a collective effort, not necessarily by ILO. I mean, from anybody. I'm not even just promoting us. I'm saying anybody who you can find in a situation to support you in those efforts. It's a bit of a cat and mouse game and trying to find where you can get a hold of these services, how you can build a budget in DDA, and how you can make sure that you're going to be fully financially supported to live independently in an apartment.
Great, that's very helpful. There's lots of questions coming in. Is there any funding available for wraparound services if you don't qualify for DDA funds?
Not that I am aware of.
Isn't the community first choice waiver might be helpful there? That's when you don't qualify via disability, but or income qualification. So I would just look at the CFC waiver, community first choice.
Okay. Tate, does ILO have any plans to work in Prince George's County?
Not at the moment. So the way we expand is pretty straightforward. If you happen to have, say, yourself and you're living in Prince George's County, you want to stay in Prince George's County, and you know, say 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, ideally, other folks that want to do the same, what I would want to do is talk to you about creating a new pod. And so what I need to know that there's interest. I need to know that there are people that wanting some supportive help. And then I just have to find a staff person. So then I would just put a call out to the Prince George's County area who want to be a community builder. We would train them and teach them what that means and how that operates. And then as long as I knew that there was enough folks to participate in that, then we could do that. But in the moment, we're just so uber focused on where we're really healthy right now, and that's in this kind of local area. And I say that because all of our pods outside of Germantown, so Gaithersburg, Rockville, Bethesda, and DC are all on the Red Line Metro. And I love that because one of our things is not just about living independently, but it's learning about how to transport and be a part of the greater community. So if you're in Rockville, you've learned Rockville, you love Rockville, but man, there's such a bigger world out there. So we want to start encouraging you and kind of supporting you to branch out, get on the Red Line, go to DC, visit our other pods, meet new people, see what DC has to offer, see what Bethesda has to offer. So that's really part of the ILO way, the ILO experience, is that once you've learned one thing, how do you get bigger? How do you branch out? How do you really beat back that isolation so you never feel like you're alone? So if we want to go to Prince George's County, now that's kind of isolating, right? It's that now they're way out there. So how do we really are giving them the full ILO experience when they're that far away? It's not impossible. It's certainly, that's part of being a small nonprofit and ebbing and flowing, is we could do it, but that's what we'd be missing out on, is that opportunity to kind of transport yourself to all these other spaces and experience all these other things. And we would really be afraid that there's a sense of isolation just by being disconnected from the other ILO folks.
Okay. Laura, I see you put an answer about the housing in Frederick County. Any other details about how to direct people for options?
So where Mars has coordinators of community services located throughout the entire state of Maryland, from the Eastern Shore all the way up to Garrett County and beyond. So, and provider agencies are located throughout the entire state of Maryland. So, and Frederick County is actually is booming. It's at this stage of the game, locating potential housing in that area, whether it's with provider agencies and things of that nature, it is starting to enhance and grow a little bit. So there certainly are programs and services out there. I can't tell you specifically what the name of providers off the top of my head, but I personally know that I supervise a coordinator who lives in Frederick County herself. So it's definitely out there.
Great, thank you. We had one question about any suggestions on how to start to take steps to own your own condo.
Yeah, I was just trying to answer that question, and I'll be honest with you. I am not sure if the Housing Support Services Program assists with home ownership, and I'm going to tell you why. Because as you become a homeowner, that becomes an asset. And in order to remain in a waiver program, unfortunately, you ultimately have to borderline stay poor, and you have to stay within that financial criteria and things of that nature. So I'm not super familiar with home ownership and how that would affect your eligibility and financially, because really it's your financial eligibility which allows you to get Medicaid, and Medicaid is what allows you to get into a waiver program. So I'm sorry I can't be more help there.
No, that's okay. One person did comment that you can set up a trust, and then Arnika Robinson is on the call. I didn't realize, and she is our transition specialist at the Catherine Thomas School. She says as long as it is the house that you live in, they do not count that as an asset in Maryland. So
Oh, good.
so that's a good thing. Yes,
that's great to know. Yes, and I know you can. There are ABLE accounts and other ways that you can set money aside that the state doesn't. Consider it, part of an asset, so to speak. So,
okay, great. I see one other question. My son has DDA acceptance, SSI, and Medicaid, but did not graduate from high school in Maryland. I am being told it is harder for him to get services because of that. We have been in Maryland for 2 years and are still waiting for services. Any suggestions?
Well,
I think, go ahead, Laura.
a DDA is reactive, not proactive. I'm just going to say that. So unfortunately, it's one of those scenarios where, unless you get into a significant crisis, that does become a problem in terms of funding and eligibility. That's why I strongly encourage that everybody who has a son or daughter who is exiting the school system, this is your prime opportunity to apply and become eligible for services through the Developmental Disabilities Program. I'm not sure if you guys have a transitioning youth person in your school and so on and so forth, but that is the key. It is the one time in your son or daughter's lifetime that you are more likely to get into the DDA program and into a DDA waiver is when you transition your son or daughter from school into the Developmental Disabilities Program. Because every year the governor sets aside money for those students, and they basically have a head count. you know, every year who's going to be exiting, as they say, graduating from the school system. And they anticipate that all of those individuals will apply for services through the developmental disabilities program. And that is how you would get in. And then typically speaking, it's because you're exiting the school and starting your world of work. You're becoming an adult, a real adult. We got to go to work now.
Laura, I think in this case, though, they're saying they do have DDA acceptance, and I'm guessing that they've been waitlisted for services.
Yeah.
And that's something you'll have to work with your CCS on, how to navigate that.
And that's it. Exactly it. It's either you get in when they transition, and if you don't take services then, or you know, for some reason miss that window, you get placed on a wait list, and until it's a crisis, it's very hard to get the funding.
I don't think there are any rules about one agency providing both housing and providing staff.
I was just going to pose that question. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there are any rules. I think that's actually very common for the bigger providers.
Yeah, yes. It's not uncommon if you receive housing support services and then that same provider agency provides a staff person to come in and assist with various tasks throughout the day.
Okay. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I'm going to stop the recording now.